Welcome to Teach to Learn's SAT prep video. In order to do well in an exam, you need to understand it. So today we'll be working on the basic format of the SAT. But first, let's talk about why you would need to take the SAT. There are three simple answers. First is for college admissions. Many top universities in the country as well as around the world require the SAT in order to gain entrance into their colleges and universities, but they also are used for college placement, which is the second reason why you would want to take the SAT. But based on your SAT score, they might place you into higher level writing classes or higher level math classes. And the final reason would be for scholarships, because lots of scholarship associations require that you provide an SAT score from the College Board that can prove your aptitude in basic high school reading and writing and math skills. Now let's discuss what the SAT actually tests. The SAT has sections in math, reading, and writing. There are a total of 10 different subsections on the SAT, but we'll talk about the breakdown in a little bit. First, let's talk about the critical reading section. The critical reading section has two types of questions. The first type is reading passages. And reading passages will provide you with an excerpt to read and then answer some questions based on it to measure your reading comprehension. The second type within the reading section are the sentence completion questions, which are often called the vocabulary questions, but as you will see, they are not so much vocabulary questions as they are a test of your ability to understand context clues and a little knowledge of basic root words and things such as from Latin and Greek. The next section that we'll talk about is the writing section. So the first section of the writing section of the SAT is the essay section. You get a short essay with a quick prompt, and you have about 25 minutes to answer that. The second section is identifying errors in sentences and paragraphs. Then there are questions that test your grammar and mechanics skills. This contains alright, well now let's talk about the math section. The math section has questions involving algebra, probability, we'll shorten that, geometry, and statistics. This is the section you're probably most prepared for from your high school classes, as the curriculum that is centered in basic high school classes is the exact curriculum that you test on the math section of the SAT, so if you're a good math student, this math section should be fairly simple. Now let's go back and talk about the breakdown in the number of questions for each of these different sections. So you'll have 48, well, why don't we use a different color pen? You get 48 reading passage questions. There are different numbers of reading passages on each SAT, but the number of questions in total that involve the reading passage remain at a steady 48. You have 19 sentence completion questions. You only get one essay, thank God. And then you have a total of 49 of these identifying writing questions, but these are broken down into 25 where you improve sentences, 18 where you fix them, and the difference between fix and improve would be I guess more of a stylistic question with improve, and fix would be a direct grammatical error that you need to change. And then the final type within identifying are paragraphs, where you have to improve paragraphs. And so they'll give you a paragraph and they'll be like, where should the sentence be placed within the paragraph or something like that. On the math section, there are a total of there are 20 initial multiple choice questions that you have to answer. Then you will have 18 more to answer in a separate section, so there are 3 different math sections on the SAT at least, and that 18 contains 10 gridden, which we'll discuss more in depth when we talk about the math section of the SAT, plus you get 8 more multiple choice questions on that section. And then finally you have another math section which has 16 multiple choice questions, and that is the breakdown of the SAT in terms of questions and the types of questions. Now we'll discuss the time breakdown of the SAT. It's a little bit more shocking for people who have not heard about the SAT or learning about it for the first time, but by the end of this course, you should be ready to tackle the SAT head on. So the total time, or add a header there, is 3 hours and 45 minutes. And yes, that is a very long time, but you'll be fine. So the breakdown for the SAT, the time breakdown for the SAT is you get 25 minutes for the essay. Then you have 6 25-minute sections, and these 6 25-minute sections can be any of the three that we talked about before. So they could be a writing section, they could be math, or a critical reading section, but they will be 25 minutes, and there will only be 6 of those. Then you have two 20-minute sections, and similar to the above category, they can be of any of the choices. And then you get a final 10-minute section, which is always a writing section. So that comes out to 10 sections, which makes you think that one of these sections would have an extra, or one of these categories would have an extra section, but that is not true in terms of grading. You do have an extra section for one of these categories, but that section does not count. It's used for future exams. So for example, they'll look at the 9 sections that actually count for your SAT score, compare how you did on that to how you did on the test section or the experimental section, and that'll kind of give them an idea about what the quality of the questions they are trying to put into the SAT are. So that has zero implication on your SAT score, but the other side to that is that you don't know which one of those sections it is, so they kind of hide them in. There is no way for you to figure it out. Many people have obviously tried, and they usually, or always, don't succeed. So now let's talk about the score breakdown. The SAT is scored each section has a minimum score of 200 and the max score of 800, which means that your total score on the SAT can be anywhere from 600 to 2400. Then you have the essay score, which is from 2 to 12, and we'll discuss how that score is formed in our essay video. Now, the key thing to remember here is that you'll have a raw score and a scaled score. And the difference between the two are that the raw score will basically tell you the number right over the number wrong. And we'll discuss the little caret to that in a couple of seconds. But the scaled score puts you on a normal curve, and that's actually a pretty decent normal curve, with 500 being in the middle, and then they'll decide your score based on that, so that about 50% of the test takers will fall above the 500. But that's determined by them, and there's no way for you to know what raw score translates into what scaled score before you actually take the test and they calculate that. Now let us discuss the raw score quickly so that you have an idea of the guessing policy that you should implement during a test. Each question that you get wrong, you get a fourth of a point off for, and so this might make it seem like you should not guess in any instance, but let's talk about this in a logical and mathematical way. Each question has 5 choices, and let's say that you have absolutely no idea what the question is. Well, then you have approximately a 0.20 chance that you get it right and you get a full point. So risk calculus within larger theory claims that you multiply the magnitude of something by the risk of something. So there's a 20% risk that you get it right and a full point of a magnitude if you get it right. But you also have to take into account the negative risk that you have, and that would be a 0.8 chance that you get negative 1/4 of a point. And if you do the math for this, you get 0.2 plus, and 0.8 times negative 1/4 is, as you should know, negative 0.2. That comes out to a net gain of 0 for every question that you guess on. And that only means that it is to your benefit to guess on a question than to not guess on a question. And yeah. Now let's say you narrowed it down so that you know that D is definitely not the right answer. Then you should most certainly guess, because you have a 0.25 chance of getting it right? Because 1 out of 4 you're guessing out of now, times still the full 1 magnitude of guessing it right, plus the negative 3 out of 4, right? Because now there's 3 choices that you possibly could get wrong, and negative 1 out of 4 is still the magnitude of getting it wrong. And that, you should know right away that that would be a beneficial number to have in your arsenal when taking the test. But let's just do the math real quick. There's 0.25 plus negative 3/16. And if we make that into a fraction as well, 1/4, make that into a fraction, and you got 4/16 plus negative 3/16. And I translated these into fractions so that you can clearly see that this number would still give you a benefit if you guessed on the SAT. You have covered the fundamentals of the SAT exam, and starting the next lesson, we'll delve into how to actually tackle the questions and how to ace the SAT.